They called it holiness, but it stank. To modern noses, the Middle Ages reek of rot, sweat, and something far worse, chosen filth. Not the grime of the poor, but the sacred stink of saints. For centuries, bathing was not just rare, it was suspect. The holiest figures, the most devout men and women of Christendom, were proudly, defiantly dirty. This wasn't neglect, it was devotion. In medieval Christian Europe, the body was a battleground. On one side, flesh, temptation, pleasure, all tied to decay and sin. On the other, the immortal soul trapped in a sack of meat. Cleanliness, then, wasn't virtue, it was vanity, and vanity led straight to hell. Many believed that bathing stirred the blood. Warm water relaxed the flesh, opened the pores, and with them, the gates to lust. Worse still, it removed the very stink that reminded the devout of their mortality. To wash too often was to risk pride in one's body, and pride was the deadliest sin of all. So saints, monks, and anchorites wore filth like a crown. Take Saint Ebba the Younger, a 9th century Northumbrian abbess. According to legend, she disfigured her own face to avoid rape by Viking raiders. But more telling is her devotion to physical misery. She slept on the floor, fasted relentlessly, and reportedly washed just once a year, on Easter. Saint Godric of Finchale lived in a hermit's hut and refused to change his clothes. Over time, his garments rotted off his body. He didn't care. His goal wasn't hygiene, it was humility. Stranger still was Saint Margaret of Cortona, a 13th century penitent who lived with such austerity that her skin peeled from filth. Fellow townspeople complained of the smell. She took it as a sign of success, her rotting flesh a daily death to sin. These weren't isolated cases. In many monastic rules, including the famously strict rule of Saint Benedict, bathing was permitted only for the gravely ill. Monks were expected to smell of toil, not perfume. Some even saw dirt as a form of divine armor, a barrier against temptation. But here's the truth. Filth wasn't just tolerated, it was weaponized. Sacred dirt became a marker of moral superiority. The more one stank, the closer to God. And this belief crept beyond cloisters into the hearts of medieval towns, where cleanliness began to take on a suspicious gleam. Women who bathed too often, vain, men who perfumed their bodies, effeminate or corrupt. Inquisitors took note. Hygiene, in the wrong context, became heresy. This shift coincided with a growing obsession, mortification of the flesh. To suffer in the body was to save the soul. This included self-flagellation, starvation, sleep deprivation, and yes, abstention from washing. Pain was sacred, pleasure was dangerous. Even the soothing touch of warm water was suspect. So the saints endured the lice. They let wounds fester. They walked barefoot on frozen ground. Their stink became legend, a rank halo announcing their piety. And medieval pilgrims sought them out. They traveled miles to kiss relics that had never been cleaned, to inhale the scent of sanctity, even if it reeked. But not everyone agreed. Throughout the Middle Ages, a parallel tradition simmered, one that whispered of Roman baths, Arabic perfumes, and the idea that cleanliness could be godly. In parts of southern Europe, especially in Islamic Spain and Sicily, regular bathing remained a custom. Public bathhouses, hammams, thrived under Muslim rule, emphasizing both bodily purity and spiritual readiness. To many Christians, this was troubling. These clean bodies belonged to infidels. Worse, they radiated a dangerous allure, fragrant, glowing, alive. Some church authorities began to associate frequent washing with moral looseness. The bathhouse became not just a hygiene hub, but a site of suspicion, of prostitution, sodomy, heresy. And so, while some nobles bathed occasionally, especially for ceremonies or marriages, many followed the monastic model. Filth became fashion. Queen Isabel of Castile reportedly bragged that she had bathed only twice in her life, once at birth and once before her wedding. It wasn't a joke. To be clean was to be suspect. To be dirty, visibly, odorously, was to be trustworthy. A body marinated in sweat and soil could not be guilty of pride. It could not seduce. It did not threaten the moral order. But even this had a hierarchy. Elite circles masked their stench with pomanders, orbs filled with cloves, ambergris and musk, and with scented gloves stuffed with herbs. They powdered their hair with crushed flowers and placed sweet-smelling rushes beneath their feet. The goal wasn't to wash. It was to cover the rot with ritual. Lower classes couldn't afford such illusions. For them, soap was rare, linen was costly, and water access was limited. But even when they could bathe, in rivers, barrels, or communal baths, the church watched closely. Were they scrubbing sinfully? Were they tempting others with their nakedness? Inquisitors weren't far behind. One bizarre case survives from 14th century France. A group of women accused of witchcraft were also condemned for excessive cleanliness. Their smooth skin, sweet scent, and regular ablutions marked them, in the eyes of their accusers, as unnatural. The devil, it was said, loved a clean vessel. The paradox deepened. Christianity preached the resurrection of the body, but treated that body like a trap. The soul might be saved, but the flesh was to be subdued, ignored, punished. Washing it felt too close to celebrating it, but saints took it further still. Saint Francis of Assisi refused to clean his ulcers. He called them brothers, sent by God to humble him. His companions fled from the smell, but he embraced it, literally. He rubbed his face in leper sores, kissed infected hands, and wore the same tunic for years. He was canonized in record time. And behind these stories lay a darker truth: control. If the church could dictate how and when you washed, or didn't, it controlled not just your morals, but your flesh. Your daily rituals became proof of submission. Washing without permission was not hygiene. It was defiance. So believers turned inward. They scraped away sin with prayer, not soap. They scrubbed their souls, not their skin. The holy body wasn't pure because it was clean. It was pure because it suffered. And the more it suffered, the closer it came to God. And yet, beneath the layers of grime, fear, and ritual, something very human endured. Desire, doubt, the longing to feel clean, even if it meant shame. Some confessors recorded penitents secretly bathing, then weeping in guilt. Others documented saints who, in old age, allowed their bodies to be washed, not out of pride, but from exhaustion. Even the most pious couldn't always bear the itch, the stink, the crawling of lice beneath sackcloth. By the late Middle Ages, attitudes began to shift. The Renaissance would resurrect Roman ideals, and soap, once a luxury, would find new purpose. But for centuries, sanctity smelled like rot. Because in medieval Europe, holiness was not golden or clean. It was filthy, rank, and proud of it. In the sacred theater of Christian suffering, dirt was costume, and stench was crown. Not hygiene, but image. Not purity, but performance. That was the holy stink of the Middle Ages.